Chris, I'm going to start the recording at 1:05 when you begin, okay?
All right, thank you so much.
I just started the recording. This is Anthony. I just started the recording for you guys.
All right,
Oh,
thanks, Anthony.
okay.
It's
Thanks,
Christina.
Anthony.
That's fine.
Hey,
Totally
Christina.
fine.
Hey, yeah. Tyrone told me to start recording the meeting. He told me to make an announcement, but I literally just pressed the button as soon as you said that.
That's perfect. I don't mind that you're recording at all. Have at it.
Okay, cool.
All right, Christina, let's go with the next slide. Hello and welcome. I'm Judith Andraco, the Regulatory Officer for the Contaminated Site Remediation and Redevelopment Program. I'd like to welcome you to the NJDEP Stakeholder Meeting for New Jersey's Recycled Content Law. This is the second so far in a series. I'm going to be the facilitator for today. We ask that you keep your mic muted through the presentations, and we ask that you only use the chat function if you are experiencing technical issues or if the name that is displayed for you on your sign-in is not who you are. In other words, if you're Joe Jones, but you're actually Jerry Jones from ABCD Company, we would ask that you please put your name and affiliation in the chat box so that we can actually have an updated and precise roll call for those of you who are attending. Next slide. I just want to go over some of the in-house rules. Friendly reminder, we've been through all of this since the start of COVID. Again, please put your information in the chat box for who you are. If you have dialed into this meeting, please email us at recycledcontent@dep.nj.gov because we are unable to identify the names of dialed in attendees and we want to make sure we know that you're here. Next slide. Also, when we come to the functions in Teams, we ask that, again, with the chat function, that other than for identifying yourself, we ask that you use the chat function for technical difficulties only, because we have our DEP staff on hand that would hopefully be able to help you with any technological problems that you might have in hearing or seeing today's presentations. We ask that you use the raise your hand function, which is up at the top of your ribbon. Please use that if you have a comment or question. After the presenter concludes the presentation, I'll be selecting people to speak based upon when their hands were raised. When you are selected to speak, we ask that you unmute your microphone and proceed with your question or comment. After you're done speaking, we would ask that you then once again mute your mic and lower your hand. In the interest of time, there may be a DEP staff member who may interject in the discussion with a cue to keep us on schedule. Today's schedule runs us from 1 until 4 o'clock, so we have 3 hours to play with and talk about a lot of recycled content information. So we're looking forward to today's presentations. We may have that staff member interject and wrap up a discussion so we can move on to our next topic in the presentation so that we're able to get through our line of topics for today. Next slide. All right, I'd like to introduce our rulemaking team for today. From the Bureau of Solid Waste Planning and Licensing, we have Chris Michaelwitz, Seth Hackman, Jill Aspinwall, Dylan O'Brien, Nell Henry. From the Bureau of Sustainability, we have Robin Heston Murphy. And today we also have Sonia Silcox from the Division of Waste, Underground Storage Tank Compliance and Enforcement. At this point in time, I'd like to toss to Chris Michaelwitz, who's going to be our host for today, going through the presentations and hopefully fielding most of the answers to your questions. Take it away, Chris.
All right, thanks so much, Judy. Christina, you can advance to the next slide, please. So we have 3 goals for today's rulemaking meeting. We're going to be discussing the calculation methodology for recycled content and covered products, as well as discussing recycled content certification report requirements, all with the goal of obtaining your input and feedback for rulemaking and program development. All right, Christina, can you move to the next slide, please? So here's the agenda for today's meeting. As mentioned, the discussion topics are recycled content calculations and compliance certification report requirements. We'll be going through an overview of the statutory requirements for each of the discussion topics, leading to a discussion portion for each topic. Discussions will consist of a list of questions that we have for you, the regulated community, and interested parties to, as mentioned, gain feedback for the overall rulemaking process. And we'll end with a conclusion to the meeting as well. So with that, Christina, can you move to the next slide, please? So as stated, we'll be starting with an overview of the statutory language related to calculating recycled content for covered products. The following slides were taken directly from Section 2 of the Recycled Content Law. Next slide, please. So, from the law, a manufacturer shall achieve compliance based on the average amount of recycled content utilized in each covered product, which is defined as either a rigid plastic container, a plastic beverage container, a glass container, a paper or plastic carryout bag, or a plastic trash bag. Manufacturers will be required to submit data based on the average weight of recycled materials used in covered products or by other metrics as determined appropriate by the department. Next slide, please. For calculating recycled content data, manufacturers may utilize either state-specific or national data to calculate the average amount of recycled content contained in each covered product category. If using national data, the manufacturer must demonstrate that state-specific data is not feasible to generate. And furthermore, the calculation may be based on entire product lines or broken down by product sublines, as long as all covered products are accounted for in the calculations. Next slide, please. For manufacturers utilizing national data for their calculations, they must prorate their data based on New Jersey's market share or population to ensure calculations accurately reflect recycled content utilized for covered products sold or offered for sale in New Jersey. Next slide, please. So we're going to get right into it. With that overview, let's move into our first discussion topic for recycled content methodology, or recycled content calculation methodology. Next slide, please. Our first question we have for you today is what data and information is already collected regarding recycled content utilization? We're looking for how manufacturers currently track recycled content utilization across their product portfolio, across brands and so forth, to really understand what is going on internally within the manufacturer's own tracking purposes and process. So I'll open it up. Please raise your hand if you would like to add any feedback or input for this question.
Okay, we're going to start with Ben Gavitt. Good afternoon, Ben.
Good afternoon. So, California has their RPPC requirement. So for national manufacturers that distribute nationally, they already have in place requirements to meet the minimum RPPC content. So in terms of being able to retrieve the data, if you're selling in both jurisdictions, it's not really a big deal. What would be great is if the requirements were identical, because you as a manufacturer, one strategy to compliance is comply with the most stringent, hope that it covers everybody. So
Got it. Thank you for your input. Yeah, we are in conversations with California and Washington State as well to try to make sure the programs align as best as possible and see where we can harmonize with other states. Of course, we are limited to what is in New Jersey statute, but like I said, we will be trying to harmonize with other states with their requirements where feasible.
All right, Ben, do you have anything further?
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we might want to move on to the second question.
All right, sounds good. So next question being, how is post-consumer recycled content calculated and tracked across products? Is there a standard format or methodology utilized for the industry? And is recycled content measured in pounds or other units that the department isn't aware of, or is it usually a weight? We're really looking into how your recycled content is tracked, measured, and overall reported. So with that, I'll open it up to the floor. Please raise your hand if you'd like to add any input to this question or have any comments.
Because this is something that we don't usually do, but we're going to have to do because of statutory requirements. We'd like to know what type of systems you have in effect now, because as these statutory obligations come up, we'd like to make it as seamless as possible and as much of an easy lift, because if you're already tracking this information in some way with whether it's some type of software or some type of approach, if we can basically shoehorn into that kind of structure and have it cross the entire spectrum so that it's really not a heavy lift for a lot of people, that would be our goal in this, to make it as user friendly for the regulated community as we can. Let's see, we have Clarence Raskina. Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon. So the way we would do it, our engineers would, for a given package, we would record the total gram weight, and it's typically in gram weight. We would work with our suppliers, and in our specs, we would determine, first of all, can we use recycled content? Depending on the product, we may not be able to, but once we can use it, we work with the supplier to document in our contracts, etc., that for a certain category of products, we're expecting X percentage of recycled content. It's typically a range in our experience. It's not always exact. And this is also a bit of an art, particularly when it comes to gigantic screws and extruders for plastic bottles, for example. It's not perfect. It's a range. We document a range by percentage, and we have the total gram weight. And so therefore, we can strongly estimate the recycled content based on gram weight as a percentage of the total weight.
Got it. That's very helpful. A follow-up question to that: do your suppliers obtain or provide documentation regarding how they procured recycled content, or is it just written to the contract and it's expected to be followed as such?
Yes, and to be perfectly candid, there are obviously exceptions in the sense based on availability of materials and such. I mean, we are also trying to produce product and get it out the door, and we do not necessarily want to hold up production because PCR may not be available. So there are escape valves, but yes, by contract they basically say so many pounds of resin or PCR is put in. And that's how we document it.
Got it. That's very helpful. That and the gram component as well. We weren't sure exactly how recycled content is measured initially before being put into covered products. So that is very helpful. Judy, do you have anything else to add?
No, Clarence, thank you very much for the info. We really appreciate it. Do we have any other hands? Mary Ellen Papard had her hand up, and she put it back down. I don't know if you have anything to add to the point.
Hi, thank you. You know what, I'm sorry. I thought then maybe I jumped the gun of the questions a little early. So I don't have the very specific information like some of the other folks do. It's more of perhaps a clarification, and the way a lot of our members are. So they have their brands. So they're the larger manufacturer, and they have many brands under them, and so a lot of their tracking and reporting currently would be aggregated across say like different product categories as opposed to individual brand by brand. And so I think that would be a preferable way of doing it. And I was looking for some clarification on, is that what the department is having in mind in terms of how for that average calculation, what that would look like? Can it be aggregated across the product category, say plastic beverage containers, or is it per individual brand?
Right. Yeah, and you will get to that conversation a little bit further into the
Okay.
presentation, but I think you're on the right track, and we have had conversations. And this is, and for that reason, we put some similar questions into this presentation so that we really understand what the manufacturers are capable of doing. So please add more when we get to that part of the presentation. But thank you for noting that, because that is really helpful for us on understanding how to address that in the rules.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Mary Ellen.
Thank-
Next up, we have Doug Sheffield. Hi, Doug. How are you?
All right, how are you? So we're in the can liner trash bag space, and so our recycled content, right? Our bill of material for items is a percent of different products, but we measure that in pounds. So not much.
Got it. Okay, so it's not necessarily standardized across the industry. It's based on however the contracts are written and how the information is provided in the first place. Is that correct?
Yeah, so like when we're producing a case of bags, that case will weigh 20 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
and 10% of it will be PCR, 80% will be some other virgin resin, and so on. So
Got it. And how is that virgin versus recycled content conveyed to you? Is that two separate documentations, or are they in the form of receipts? Or are they put together in one balance sheet? Can you just elaborate a little more on how virgin versus recycled content is conveyed?
so we have right the inputs in our ERP system. The inputs are set up as different items.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay.
We track down, so we can tell exactly how many pounds of each product we consumed or in any given period.
Got it. Okay, that's very good to know. Thank you. Oh, Judy, you're muted.
Good grief, I keep hitting the wrong button. Next up, we have Jody Mason. Hi, Jody. How are you today?
Hi, good. How are you doing?
Good, thanks.
Thanks for hosting this forum. I have a question about reporting standards. So we do, mass balance, aggregation, like Mary Ellen mentioned, across our portfolio. The issue that we're running into right now is that some of our portfolio follows across different business unit entities. And so while we would be able, to meet the mandate across our portfolio, the way that we have to report would kind of split up that those business units, those business entities to report separately. And so I just wanted to raise that concern here, because that is something that's sort of a bit of a challenge for us.
Okay, that's good to know. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the business units or business entities?
Yeah, so they have separate, yes, thank you. They have separate tax identification numbers. And so that's how we're required to report in New Jersey. So I just wanted to raise that, because if there was a way that we could combine those business entities, even though they have maybe separate tax identities for business purposes, but it's the same company. We own all of them. That's something that I wanted to raise here, because that would certainly be beneficial for us.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you. That really helps. Judy, you have anything to add? Any further comments? I don't see any hands raised right now.
No further hands. I think we're ready for the next question.
All right, sounds good. So we're trying with this next question, trying to see how glass versus paper versus glass differs when calculating recycled content. I'm sure they have different markets and they might have different ways of conveying recycled content. So we're trying to see how, if at all, they differ between how they're calculated for recycled content for products that utilize plastic or glass or paper. Folks from either industries can chime in and see if they can elaborate on the distinction between the three materials. That would be very helpful for determining how each material or each covered product might require different calculations if need be. And the answer to this question could very well be it doesn't differ. It's the same. It's just a matter of the material. But we're just trying to make sure that there aren't any distinctions between the three if there aren't any, or vice versa if there are.
Now, I just have a question because I normally don't deal with this, but when you're dealing with plastic versus glass versus paper, just for paper, is there is the paper always dry? Is there a measurement of the different weights of the paper?
Mhm.
Like, because I know I'm just thinking from a layman's perspective, there's a lot of different variables when you're dealing with paper versus glass. Like glass,
Mhm.
you'd have your different types of cutlet, you'd have your different colors, that type of thing. But I didn't know is there a wet weight issue that comes in, or is it all dry? Is there any other point of reference that's also measured for any particular type of material?
Exactly. That's what we want to try to get a better understanding of with this question, to see how the different markets and the different industries convey recycled materials, calculate recycled materials, anything like that. So, like I said, if there are no differences, we can proceed with that. But we want to propose this question just to get ahead of any differentiations between the three.
We actually have a hand from Paul Harvey. Hi, Paul. How are you?
Good to be back again. So I just was, thinking about, the topic that we're talking about, in terms of the differentiations between, your corrugateds and your, regular papers and whatnot. I do know that there are different markets, obviously for each of them. I'm pretty involved, at least me personally, in my county's recycling program, and so I do know that they have several different. They supply several different outlets in terms of recycled materials, paper, can metals, plastics, corrugated cardboard, etc. So I can put you in touch with my county recycling agency. Maybe you can talk with them and maybe see what the different markets are, to go ahead and see how they calculate that. Obviously, or if I don't know what the recycling program is in New Jersey, but you may want to talk with your, municipal recycling handlers, to see, and the people who they drop their suppliers off with, to see how that's calculated. Because, normally, it all depends on the local the actual recycling program, in terms of, do they just kind of ship everything all together, paper and cardboard all together, or do they, what all the different types of plastics, do they just, crush them up and send them all, separately?
Right.
So it's definitely something I would, kind of, I don't know if you're talking about, county boards of recycling or, recycling agencies. But yeah, I would definitely reach out to them to try to figure out what the best way to how it processes further down the line.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. We weren't sure if the calculations differ between the materials, but you're kind of saying that it might be on how the material is shipped once it's collected, and that I don't think we had initially looked at it through that lens. So that's a good point to raise with us. So thank you for that. It really helped. That's really helpful as well.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Clarence has a little more to add. How are you again?
Yes. So I think we spoke briefly about plastic earlier, where depending on structure and base resin, etc., it's typically, at least we typically document it based on percentage recycled content and recorded in grams. However, paper, there are many options. Okay, so really, if you're talking about fiber, I mean, yeah, like the previous gentleman just raised corrugated. That is a category in and of itself. There's paper board, which is, for example, cereal boxes, and of course there's just general use paper that you can put in your copier machine, for example. So within that, depending on the mills that produce, for example, paperboard you can quite commonly, find everything from virgin paperboard all the way to clay-coated newsback that's might have about 35% in general. It's a very good standard, regardless of which mill you buy it from. So paperboard, for example, you can go anything from 100% virgin to something that might have at least 35% or more of recycled content in it. Okay, and they have mills that certify that. Now, when it comes to corrugated, it's again, by design, you could probably have 33, 34%, and there are some mills that are 100% recycled content. However, corrugated is a lot more challenging because availability of recycled content, again, to put into getting a performance box is sketchy. It can be available, and sometimes it's low. And in times when it's not available, you might get 100% virgin corrugated box. So typically, even the largest mills, no one will say we have exactly this much PCR content in a box.
Is there a
because
season for them? Like
it's not season, it's based on availability, and it's directly correlates to how well we recycle in this country. It's one of the best recycled materials, but yet it's not a very good number to be, despite recycling across the country. So having said that, corrugated is a fiber material, and just depending on production and demand, it most likely will have some recycled content. But most big corrugated suppliers will probably comment and say, we put this many metric tons in an annual year into the boxes we sent to your particular company. However, they won't comment and say, we know exactly how much is in a specific box on a specific month in a specific day that came to us. So it just depends. It's much more challenging to get an exact number, but that's recorded again, percentage. It's percent by weight.
Percent by weight.
So
okay, that's good to know. And also it might also differ, maybe not by the material type, but within the material itself, depending on what the covered product could be. That's also something I've picked up as well from your comment. So it's also very good to know. We were trying to figure out if there's a differentiation between the three, but it could also differ well within just one material. So
correct.
We'll have to figure out that'll also have to be addressed in the rules as well to make sure that we are because the only paper product covered under the law is paper carryout bag. So I have to make sure that we are specific to that type of paper when discussing or clarifying this the calculation for this in the rules. Yep. So thank you. That's very helpful.
Thanks very much. Next up, we have Dennis Hart. Hi, Dennis. How are you?
Sorry about that. Excuse me. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to, and thank you for doing this. It's very helpful, and we all appreciate this. I have a question in growing out of our discussions about advanced recycling, and it's about mass balance. And how has the department thought about including mass balance in the calculations of recycled content? And are you considering what other places use where you have third-party certifiers that are able to certify the recycled content?
So you might be jumping the gun a little bit here because that is,
okay.
We have a question on that, I think in 2, maybe 3 slides.
Okay.
So feel free to come back up and ask that question or provide some insight when we get there. But yeah, we will be touching upon that a little bit more.
I know there's other people that want to talk about that. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thanks. Next up, we have Dave Westerhoff.
Hi, I represent a large food manufacturer, and we bottom line, you're talking about making it easy or convenient. We spend a lot of time reporting every year to Ellen MacArthur and also Walmart and some of the different retailers. And so whether there's different materials, we all end up in pounds because we're trying to compare, right? We're looking at our usage on a 100% basis of how much of it's plastic, how much of it's paper, how much steel, how much glass. So we may engineer down to the gram and work with our suppliers, and our suppliers will provide us a certificate of compliance to what our specification is, right? But ultimately, we use our volume that we produced and we multiply that out and convert it into pounds so that we can compare all the materials at the end of the day.
Okay.
So
that's very good. Would you mind if you have it on hand to send that or provide it through the recycled content email inbox to send that calculation or that conversion factor? We'd be interested in seeing how to expand it beyond just using pounds to make it easier for manufacturers that may not use pounds for their standard measurement. So providing that conversion factor might be useful for other purposes as well.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. Next up, we have Doug Sheffield.
Yep, I'm back. So I just wanted to follow up. So the person that was talking about the paper, plastic in our world, particularly the can liner world, is the same. The variety of recycled material that we get in, the quality will differ pretty drastically from time to time and load to load. So we look at it and deal with it on a bigger percentage basis. So just like he was saying, we'll say over a period of time, the product will have, say, a 10% level across the board. But it's very difficult to say any individual bag or any individual case has a specific percent, because you get some PCR in that runs great. We can get 15-20%. Some of it is dirty. We can only get 5 at any given time. So
that's why it's helpful to have that average, because it's also a factor of the quality of material you're receiving as well.
Quality and availability of the material at any given time.
Got it. That is helpful. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Doug. Next we have John Catarano. How are you, John?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having a session today. I wanted to make maybe a recommendation that there are great trade associations out there that could be helpful in these discussions, and they often represent a lot of the brands and some of the constituencies here. The question I had, and you might get to this in some of the later slides, and excuse the background noise, please. So Nestle has a virgin reduction goal for plastics, and we are always looking at emerging technologies. You can call it chemical, molecular, or advanced recycling. It's got a few different names. Will those methodologies be deemed viable in the content reductions or content mandate? And will and they do use a certification called ISCC. Will those be suitable for meeting some of the standards and goals? Because that would definitely open up the possibilities and the playing field. And those materials do come from plastic streams that are not recycled today. So that could be an accretive solution.
Right. And Judy, you can quote me if I'm wrong here, but I think that bill is still going through our state's legislature right now.
That's correct,
so
Chris.
it's unclear right now what we will be able to do in regards to advanced recycling in this law. So it's still more so a factor of the position that the legislature will take at this point. Judy, you have anything else to add to that point?
Nope.
Could I just add one thing to that point?
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's Dennis Hart.
Yep.
I just want to bring up, even if that advanced recycling law doesn't make it in New Jersey, we're still going to have advanced recycling materials being produced around the country that are going to be shipped into the state. So you're going to have to figure this out either way.
Yeah, that is a good point. I think
at this point the answer is no until we have a law that would let us do it.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say we're having separate conversations on advanced recycling to get a better understanding as to the overall technological ability of the technology. So that is more so a conversation that we're going to have separately from this law. We are watching it as closely as we can, but how it's going to be addressed in this law remains to be known.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Yep. Let's see. Paul, Dave, and John, you still have your hands up, but I think we've taken care of your issues with this question so far. Chris, we don't have anything new for this one, so we might want to move on.
Well, we have one question left on this slide that I would like to get to, and it could be a quick question, hopefully. So how can we want to hear from regulated community interested parties about how the department can further clarify how to calculate recycled content, whether that be through maybe a calculation formula. I know California for their RPPC program has that. We're not sure if manufacturers have found that helpful. So if there's any anything you'd like to share with the department so that we can get a better understanding of how to clarify how to calculate recycled content in the rules, that would be helpful here.
We have a hand from Taryn O'Connor. Hi, Taryn, how are you?
Sorry, I was okay. I'm unmuted now. Hi. I raised my hand a bit late, and I also sadly arrived a little bit late. So please let me know if this question had already been answered, and I can relook at the transcript. But my one question is, I know that in terms of calculating the contents of your containers, what if you have like, do you take the overall average of the recycled content in all of your containers? So like if we have one container that has no PCR, but like is like 75% PCR in another one, do we take the average of all of our containers?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for your question. Next, we have Robert Locke. Hi, Robert.
Hi, everyone. I know you said you were coordinating with folks in Washington and California, but I think the formula that Washington put out was particularly helpful to determine an average based on national sales, things like that. So that was helpful for us.
That's good to know. Thank you.
All right, thank you much. Next up, we have Allie Peck. Hi, Allie.
Sorry, I was on mute. I would say, yeah, more information is always better, especially I think for my membership. And I would also just like to say that we would support any kind of harmonization with other states. And I get a lot of specific questions. So more information, formulas, I think that would be helpful to everyone.
All right, that is good to know. Thank you.
Thank you
Much.
All right.
And I think that's all the hands for this slide.
All right, let's move on to our next slide, Christina. We can advance the slide when you get a chance. So we have a blurb from the statute available at the top of your screen. We're looking to get a better understanding regarding the specific terms product subline and product line to better understand what the legislature intended and what is and what current operations for industry looks like. So let's start with the first question. What do you consider a product subline to be, and how does that relate to recycled content calculations, if at all?
Okay, first up, we have Robert Locke. Robert, I don't know if you have a question about this or if you were a holdover from the last one, but the floor is yours.
Thanks. No, I always forget this about Teams that you have to unclick your hand raise, so ignore me.
No worries. Thank you. Do manufacturers consider, do the manufacturers believe they will use product sublines at all in their calculations, or are you most likely going to use the covered product categories defined as rigid plastic containers, plastic beverage containers, and so forth?
We have Allie Peck.
Sorry. Hi again. I would say if we don't have to get down to product, like the more specific we get on sublines and sublines, the more difficult the reporting is going to be. And I would say for our packaging doesn't necessarily substantially always differ. So I think more flexibility here is something we would be in favor of if possible.
Okay, that's
So
good to know.
keeping it up at the product line.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
I represent the Consumer Technology Association. So think of it in terms of like versions of laptops or versions of cell phones. Like it would get very specific, and you would get a lot of information that could just be more averaged and aggregated. That would help. Yeah. So
that's very good to know. Yeah, we weren't exactly sure what the legislature meant when they mentioned product sublines, and we weren't sure if that's like an industry specific term or if that was something that it was just thrown in. as to mean something else. So we were trying to get a better understanding as to what the industry interpret or how the industry interprets that term. So thank you. That's really helpful for us as well.
Next up is Mary Ellen Papard. Hi again.
Hi again, and thank you so much for doing this. I think I would sort of largely echo what Ali said first off, in terms of the less complex and difficult it is for our members to calculate, and the ability to aggregate across brands, I think is very helpful. One of the questions my members was getting is, well, what's a product subline? They're not sure what the legislature meant by that. We're not sure what the legislature meant by that.
But we were in the same boat with that one.
Yeah, so I think if it's possible to aggregate across those covered categories, we would certainly I think appreciate that flexibility. One of the questions we had received a lot during the registration piece, which I think again goes to this question in terms of subline, is, are we talking about, for example, different sizes? If you have 5 different sizes of a particular brand of ketchup, and so that I think that's where some of the confusion, at least for my membership, stems from.
Right, and I think that's kind of where how we were interpreting it, and we weren't sure what the benefits of providing the product subline if the brand itself was already captured. So that's one of the purposes behind this question as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you much.
So I guess we can move on to the next question, being some examples of product lines that may exist in the marketplace. So would like a product line be something like the specific brand and all of the products within that brand, or is it a product is it just one product under a manufacturer and then parsed out between all of the product lines within that brand, if that makes sense? I'm trying to.
Okay, from a layman's perspective, let me see if I can get there. Because I've been to like my local BJ's or Costco, and you see the picnic setup, which has say it's Heinz. You have your Heinz ketchup, your Heinz mustard, your Heinz relish. Now they're all Heinz, and they're all kind of in the same container, but would the ketchup versus mustard be a subline issue because they're kind of condiments, or is ketchup and mustard's mustard?
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Thank you. I was trying to think of one off the top of my head, but it wasn't coming. So I was trying to be as general as possible. But yeah, so as you can see in the blurb above, the calculation of averages may be based on a manufacturer's entire product line or separated into product sublines. So we're trying to figure out exactly how those two terms differ, so that we can make sure that the calculations coming in actually accurately reflect what the manufacturers sell between their product lines, product sublines, and the Heinz being ketchup, relish, mustard, and so forth. Are those individual product lines, or will those be considered product sublines? Because that will be a factor into how the compliance certification reports will require information from the manufacturers.
And it's like I'm thinking about, there's that as an example, but then there's also like Tide. You have your Tide liquid, you have your Tide flings, you have your Tide scent beads, you have the Tide dryer sheets, just like you would with whether it's Gain or Downy or whatever. Would those different types of products under that same name be considered a subline? Or we're not sure if there's a type of specification that's actually used as a standard in the industry.
Exactly.
We have a hand from Ali Peck.
Yeah, I don't have a specific answer for you. I was just gonna say, I think it differs across industries, and because this is for all packaging of, more or less packaging of all products, I think it's going to be difficult to get into specific sublines. So again, I would be in favor of more flexibility and, products in general, as in like a laptop versus phone, instead of like this specific laptop with this kind of Intel, with this kind of definition, or like, like TVs are like 1080. You can have different kinds of specs within the TVs, and that would just not be necessary. You wouldn't get a lot out of us dividing it up by like deep into the sublines.
So
Right.
instead of like, say you have a notebook versus a laptop, they could be all laptops, and then you have a separate category, which would be your tablets,
Exactly.
which would be
Yeah,
like the
we would.
single.
Yeah, we would be in favor of more simplified reporting in that scope. Again, if specific manufacturers have it broken down by the kind of laptop, then maybe they will choose to submit it that way. But I think requiring it to be done by sublines, you're going to get a lot of information that isn't necessarily comparable across different industries.
Is this something that's being done already, or is like the subline concept something new and independent of this particular statute? I didn't know if it's actually happening in the marketplace. That's another thing that we're looking into.
If manufacturers are reporting based on sublines, I
Yeah.
don't have an answer on that. So unfortunately, I can't help you there.
Well,
I can get back to you.
I see a couple more hands that are being raised too, so
Great, you can move on to them.
All right,
Thank
thanks
you.
so much, Allie. Next is John Catarano. Welcome back.
Again, I don't disagree with making it simplistic, and I don't know anything about laptops and how PCR works in that. But from a beverage perspective, we use something called a BOM. It's a bill of material, and that's an SAP, and that gives us very finite detail of what
What's an SAP? I'm sorry.
It's a sales engine and how we sell our products, right? It's a platform. It's very specific, and you could have a company like Nestle that might want to promote in a premium product PCR for consumers. So in some of these, I'm sure I'm not speaking for everyone here. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty positive I'm not. But when you get to data, it can be very specific. Even it's just the way it is. It's not that we went out of our way to make it that way. It's just the way it is in the system. So I think in some cases you can extract really specific detail and information. If I look at California, for example, we do report the percentage over an aggregate of what's subject to the content requirements, but we have the detail down to that level because it's in the bill of material. So we'll see it.
Got it. Okay.
Just one example for you to ponder. That's all.
And that's good to know, because just because some manufacturers might be capable of producing that information doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's going to be able to do it. So we want to make sure that we are addressing everyone's concerns and making sure that the requirements are achievable for everyone, not just those few, but maybe having something along the lines of optional data that manufacturers can provide. Maybe we can get some more information and get that more thorough data for more specific data than compared to requiring it and not being able to get something that's helpful for us.
Yeah, there's a very, very heightened sense of importance on claims, generally speaking, in packaging. So the data is very important, and the specificity of the data is extremely important, because when you make a claim, it's got to be pretty sound from a legal perspective. And I'm sure that makes sense to everybody.
Yeah, that definitely does. Thank you.
All right, John, thank you so much. Next, we have Paul Harvey. Hi, Paul.
Hello. I'm just kind of thinking, at least from a practical perspective, at least when it comes to this. When I look at a grocery shelf, and I'm just going to go ahead and use butter, for example. When I look at a Land O'Lakes packaging for the unsalted butter versus the salted butter, I don't necessarily, unless there's a visible, shape differential, and we're talking in terms of waste here, there's really not much in terms of difference in terms of actual waste, projected. Okay, it's still the same, rectangular box with the inside wrap, with the four sticks of butter inside wrapping. So again, I'm kind of just thinking of this from a practical perspective, and this is that if you have all of this subline data, it would definitely be I don't want to say it'd be unnecessary, but I'm just saying that, like, again, the difference between the unsalted butter and the salted butter, like, there's no difference. It gets the same shape, it has the same wrapping, the same amount of butter in it. So, and the 4 sticks. So the question then becomes, is it, are we just doing it to doing the reporting just to do the reporting? You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, if it's just because something's,
like I said, I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just more or less thinking about this from a practical perspective.
From a practical standpoint. Yeah. I mean, just because something is marketed differently doesn't necessarily mean it's packaged differently. That's a good point.
Right. So, I mean, and the other thing too is that, there may be proprietary information involved, in terms of the actual packaging, which, I mean, being involved in the foods industry, I mean, we all have our dirty little secrets. So, I mean, that could also be, and particularly if this information is going to be subject to, government information requests, that could also lead to, trade secret issues, further down the line. So, for whatever reason, I mean, sometimes, at least, for me personally, I like a particular brand of yogurt because of the way that it's designed and the way that it fits my lifestyle, so that, at least to a company, they could claim that is, through their market research, whatever, they could go ahead and claim that that's, proprietary information. So again, just kind of thinking of more of a practical concern, just not advocating anything specific, but just kind of thinking about other things that kind of go into product design.
Right.
The same 16 ounces that, a tall, just say, for example, like, again, a 16-ounce yogurt, or however much an 8-ounce yogurt, Yoplait yogurt, okay, the Yoplait yogurts are tall and skinny, okay, is the same weighs the same as an 8-ounce, contains the same 8 ounces as an 8-ounce, Chobani yogurt. Now, the question then becomes, okay, what is the actual amount of, what is the actual surface area of, that particular product? And that is obviously, that's a design patent, that's a design specifically to a company, that's a brand, that is a qualifying feature. So, I like I said, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a patent lawyer, but I don't know, maybe this is something to go ahead and look into.
Yeah, definitely. And there is a proprietary information provision in the law that restricts the department from releasing that information. So to address any of those concerns, there is something in the law that would hopefully remedy some of those concerns. And we also are going to touch upon proprietary information a little bit later in the in this presentation as well. So thank you, Paul. That was really helpful.
Thanks very much. Next up, we have Jody Mason.
Again, I agree with what Paul just stated, as well as Ali's concerns around simplicity. No, we're not seeing sublines being asked for in other states. What we're asked to report is total volume of covered material sold in the state and what the percentage of PCR is in that total volume. So that's the more simplistic way to look at it. And it would be total PCR for plastic, total PCR we're selling in glass, total PCR for paper. So under a covered material, it's the total volume with the percentage of PCR.
Okay, that's good to know as well. Yeah, we'll definitely want to keep it as simple as possible. So definitely noted that through the feedback received so far. So thank you.
Sounds good. Next up, Ray Cantor. Hi, Ray. How you doing?
Doing well. I wasn't planning to speak because I really don't know the topic as well as many of your commentators today, but I'm just struck at the complexity of what you're trying to do. So I don't envy your task. I think you're looking to regulate, or you're dealing with manufacturers from across the world, and every product sold, on every shelf. So I would just suggest that we not lose sight of the goal, which is to increase the amount of recycled content. So I would maybe echo what I think other commentators are saying, and keep it as simplistic and as flexible as possible. Let's not gather information that isn't going to be used, that is not going to have relevance. At the end of the day, you may not be perfect in every calculation, in every reporting data point. What's important is that we achieve the goals of the legislation of increasing recycled content. So again, as a layperson who's being blown away from the details being given to you guys, I'm just arguing for simplicity and flexibility.
Thank you very much.
Duly
Appreciate
noted.
your comment.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.
Uh,
Let's move on to our next. I think we spent a good amount of time on this topic.
Yep.
So let's move on to our next slide. We have another question similar to the last, more so on calculating state versus national data calculations. So again, a blurb from the statute is included at the top of your screen. And are we trying to get at whether manufacturers intend to provide national, regional, or state-specific data? So that way we can better prepare for those compliance certification reports to come in. As well as just understanding what industry is capable of doing when providing data to us. Judy, you're muted if you're.
Yep, I just wanted to give it another maybe 10 seconds for hands to come up. New ones, we have Clarence. Welcome back.
Yeah, so I would argue for national data then prorated towards the population of New Jersey, only because that is perhaps the most conservative way to go about it versus state specific. It's very difficult anymore, given e-commerce and all the other challenges on how product is procured by citizens in the state of New Jersey. And so it would it'd be much more favorable for based on national sales versus and then drilling it down to a based on the population in New Jersey.
Right. Yeah, and that's the statute completely allows for that. We're just trying to get a better understanding, or just better prepare ourselves for what will be incoming to us. So to understand what manufacturers are intending to provide to us come compliance certification reports when they're due 2025, I believe. So thank you. That's really helpful. So it sounds like a lot of the manufacturers will be steering to national data just for, again, simplicity, ease of compliance. Do we have any more hands on this question?
Right. Yep, we have two. Allie Peck.
Yeah, I was gonna say that manufacturers sometimes have trouble knowing exactly where everything can be sold because the retailers can control a lot of the distributions. And we can't necessarily tell the retailers what states to sell our products in. So that's just, keep that in mind when thinking about this is the retailers control.
That's very good to know. I mean, the statute itself, for the most part, exempts most retailers from these requirements. So they are a piece to this puzzle, and we want to make sure that we keep them in mind as well when addressing like supply chains and how covered products move throughout the country. So thank you.
Yeah, we can't tell Best Buy sell our laptops here instead of here.
Right. That's good to know.
We get to decide.
Right. Thank you. Follow-up question to that.
Wait, we have one. We still have one more. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Diane put her hand down. So.
Yeah, just because I knew you were picking on me.
Do you want to add, or do we want to wait for Chris to?
Yeah, I just wanted to add real quick just to kind of support what they were saying. Diane Brickman from Sherwin-Williams. So there's pros and cons to the reporting. Reporting for producers into a state narrows down the information because we can only report what we actually sell directly into the state. Because when we're selling to distributors, in that state, they may sell it out of the state, or we're selling to distributors out of the state, they may sell into the state, and we won't be capturing that information. But if we report national data, if you require us to report all weights that sold nationally, that's a big report. And that's a lot of, that's like, I don't know if every company can handle that all in one report. So that would be an aggregation of many, many other reports to get that data. But if we can give percentages, so we would get information from our packaging suppliers, and they would tell us what the PCR content is by percent, and we could give that in percentages much easier than saying out of everything we sold last year in nationally, it's this much weight. That's a much harder thing to give.
Right. But in that percentage, just a follow-up question, in that percentage that they provide, is that percentage by weight or by volume, or is that specified, or is it just a flat percentage?
Yeah, it is by weight in grams.
Okay, that's in grams. Okay, that's good to know as well. All right. Thank you very much. It's very much appreciated.
Thanks, Diane.
So next question on this slide, the requirements of this law require manufacturers to indicate to the department whether national data is not feasible to generate. So to effectuate this part of the law, we want to know what documentation can be provided to demonstrate state-specific data is not available or feasible to generate. So with that, we just want to understand if there is any type of documentation, or if it should be something as simple as a certification that state-specific data is not feasible to generate. So just a few comments on this would be very helpful for us to figure out how to address this in the rules.
Well, we're not hearing from everybody, so that's making me think that we're headed toward a certification of some sort. Oh, Mary Ellen, welcome back.
Thank you so much. No, I think just to your, I think you said it. I think certainly a simple as possible certification would certainly be appreciated. I mean, the members had said from the beginning of these discussions a couple of years back, before this was even law, they didn't see how they would really be able to parse out the information for specific states. That's just not how it works with the national and global brands. And so I'm not aware that there'd be any sort of documentation that would be that currently exists in that regard. So thank you.
Yeah, exactly. We weren't sure if it did exist or if it's like I said, as simple as it doesn't exist. Yeah. So let's just certify to that. So thank you. That's really helpful. All right, I think we're good to move. I don't see any other hands on this. All right, Christina, can you move to the next slide? This is a pretty quick question as well. Again, a blurb from the statute is at the top of your screen. Manufacturers are required to average the amount of post-consumer recycled content by weight or another metric. We would like to know if there are other metrics out there aside from weight that you would like to be included in the rules or regulations as another way to calculate recycled content. And if it is as simple as it should be by weight, then we can leave it as B and move on. But we just want to allow this opportunity for manufacturers and in the regulated community to chime in and say if you prefer another metric of some form.
Diane Brickman.
So this is sort of related, but not 100%. So we get questions from our suppliers on if they can use post-industrial recycled content instead of, or in conjunction with post-consumer, because the post-consumer recycled content isn't always available. Would that be allowed as into the totally recycled content or no?
By the definition of post-consumer recycled content, it specifically excludes post-industrial material, so it would not be able to be included in the calculations for covered products when certifying to the standards in the law.
And then one other question, since I have you, since like FIFRA and hazardous products are not covered, are they still supposed to be in the reported? In the report and just exempt, or just not reported at all?
The certification requirements require the exemption to be like cited or provided in some form, but it would not have to be calculated in the calculation for certifying to a certain standard. All we would need to know is that these products meet an exemption and cite the exemption, cite the specific exemption that it meets from the law. And that would only need to be done one time as for the duration of any applicable exemption, or unless the intended use or the product's packaging changes at some point. But for the most part, we're going to keep that part as simple as possible, citing to that one specific exemption for the duration about how long it's applicable.
So that means that they are still reported, because you have to report them to exempt them, right?
We need to know if it's a rigid plastic container, for example, we need to know if that's being sold in the state. That's within the statute as well. But it would only need to be reported one time, and that will be done through the registration. We have a revamped registration process soon to be launched, hopefully later this year. And that'll be a component of it, is identifying identifying covered products and their specific exemption.
Okay. Thanks.
Of course, thank you. Is
Do
there
we have any more
anyone?
question? I don't see any more. Oh, there we go. Hi, Clarence.
Yeah, I just got something that Chris mentioned about a revamped registration process.
Yeah.
So what is the timing on that?
Spring 2023. Within the next couple of months, we're working with our software developers to develop more of an electronic process rather than having a fillable PDF, just to make it more user friendly.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right. Susan Vial. Hi, Susan. How are you?
Put my microphone down. I'm good. I just wanted to expand on the question that was asked previously about the industrial. Post-industrial is not reportable.
Yes, that wouldn't be allowable under the calculation. So if you're going to factor in post-industrial, it would not be allowed under the statute requirements. Just because under the definition of post-consumer recycled content in the law, it specifically excludes post-industrial source material from being considered post-consumer.
Okay, so you said that they would have to report it once, and that is like once ever, or once per year, once per month?
That was only for the for exemptions for covered products. Like if it's sold in a rigid plastic container, but the product itself would be exempt, say under the FIFRA requirements, for example. As long as that product continues to meet that exemption, it would only have to be reported one time.
But you're going to need a weight?
No, it wouldn't have to. We wouldn't need specifics. We just need to know that the specific citation for the exemption that it qualifies for.
I get you. Okay, so that's all that we would have to file is the exemption. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Thanks for clarifying.
Of course.
Are there any other questions? Dennis Hart?
Yes, on that part about the exemptions, have you considered just granting an exemption since it's exempt under the law without having to submit any paperwork? I mean, if people are shipping FIFRA regulated pesticides that are exempt under the law, couldn't you just give sort of like a general blanket recognition of that exemption without requiring people to submit?
So the law requires, regardless of exemption status, to register with us, and that through that registration, you'll indicate whether the products are exempt. That's just in the statute as written in the registration section. If a manufacturer has exempt products, they're required to report that one time.
All right.
I'm not seeing any more hands on this question either. So it looks like we will be moving forward with the by weight language as included in the statute. All right, that is easy. Christina, next slide, please. All right, and this is the last slide for recycled content calculations. We want to know what methods are out there for calculating recycled content and what are the pros and cons of the various methods. The department is aware of the mass balance approach. We want to know if there's other recognized approaches out there and what the drawbacks and benefits of each are. And we would like to know a little bit more about the mass balance approach as well, just to further clarify how that could be incorporated into the rules. I was expecting a lot more from this one.
First up, we have Allie Peck.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you, but I was wondering if maybe we could get like a list of these questions after the call, and I can give you some additional feedback possibly.
Yes, like last time as well, the presentation and the recording will be made available once posted to the website, and everyone will get a link to the recording and the presentation once it's posted to the website.
Great.
And Nell just put the link in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you, Nell. And as always, you can always follow up with us as well if you don't feel comfortable answering right now or you want more time to think. feel free to reach out to us at any point to elaborate a little bit more on the various recycled content calculation methodologies that are out there and available for manufacturers.
Okay, Dennis has a question.
Chip, sorry again. Are you asking for the specific names of companies that are used or utilized for third-party certification? Is that what that question is?
Oh, no, not specific companies for the next question. We're just trying to get a better understanding as to the capabilities of third-party certifiers and how they are able to, if they are able to verify recycled content calculations, if needed by the department to either consult out or request a verification of some form.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. We do have.
We have Clarence.
So I assume you're asking this question for audit purposes?
Yes, yes.
Okay, depending on the substrate, it might be very, very challenging based on my engineering experience to do it, to take this to a third-party lab, for example. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very challenging, I would say, for sure. So.
Okay, that's good to know.
Particularly if it comes to paper or corrugated, there are mechanisms where you could, but it's quite in detail and quite pricey to verify. So.
Right. Yeah, we are aware of that as well, and it will most likely be an agreement between all the parties involved to make sure that the third-party certifiers are that their specifications for what they're permitted to do are explained clearly and concisely. So then this question is to really help inform that process once we get there, and even if we get there, being that there is a third-party certification component in the compliance certification report section of Section 14, allowing the department to use third-party certifiers in conjunction with or in partnership with the manufacturing industry. So really trying to get a better understanding as to what they're capable of doing and if they're able to verify recycled content calculations.
Chris, next up we have Adam Peer. Hi, Adam. How are you?
Hi. Thank you for doing this. I'm definitely learning a lot. I just wanted to add to this question that we'd be happy to provide the department with some certification programs that we've seen that we think that apply to our industry, as well as the process that they go through to be audited and actually certify both the recycled content and then the methodology. Because I think what's coming through on this call, at least for me, and it's been mentioned a few different times, is that a lot of the math and details really matters to this in order to recognize that it's a North American market, and we need to make sure that the calculations make sense for the footprint that material circulates through. So we'd be happy to provide the department with that information for your consideration, especially on this question.
Yeah,
Great.
That'd be helpful. That'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Next, John Catarano. Welcome back, John.
Thank you. The APR, the Association of Plastic Recyclers, for plastic specifically, last year launched a PCR certification. I'm happy to put it in the chat for you if you want to look at it.
Yeah,
and
gladly.
I can
Thank
also
you.
connect you. Yeah, it's a really robust program that gets to certification for plastics, and that potentially is an option for you to consider.
Thank you. That'd be very
Awesome.
helpful.
Thank you much. Next, we have Dennis Slater. Hi, Dennis. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you.
Thanks.
If your product is manufactured and packaged overseas and shipped in, how would you be able to use a lab overseas to do this, say in Europe, or would you have to have it certified by a lab here in the U.S.?
I don't think we have the answer to that question just yet. I think that's something I'll have to definitely consider in the rulemaking meetings that we have, but that's something I will definitely take into consideration. I'll have to consider capabilities of European labs and how they differ from American labs and so forth. So that will just be something I'll have to have additional conversations on.
And if you
Thank
have a viewpoint on it, please feel free to send us some literature on it.
Yes, please. Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Could I ask one other question?
Sure.
If the addition of post-consumer recycled content changes the structure of your packaging? Say if you're using clear plastic and you use recycled content and it changes that and makes it a cloudy, is that something that could be exempt, or is that something that the manufacturer would then just have to change their packaging design to accommodate?
I don't know if we have an answer for that one, for that specific question. We'll have to refer you back to the specific waiver and exemption requirements in the law. I think there's section 10 and 12. I could be wrong on that, but we'll refer you back and stick to the statutory language for right now, and then further discuss that in our rulemaking meetings as well.
And Nell just put a link to the recycled content law in the chat.
Just one follow-up question. Does that cloudiness or the addition of recycled content, does that sacrifice the structural integrity or the health and human safety aspects of the packaging? Just for clarification.
No, it doesn't. It would just be a, I mean, you can see the product obviously in the clear packaging, and if it becomes cloudy, then you've eliminated that. And this may have been discussed before, but if you don't have post-consumer recycled content available, what's your avenues for that?
There are waivers and exemptions in the law. The waiver section, I believe, is section 11. Again, don't quote me on that. They're all around section 10 and 15 of some within that range. But yeah, there are waivers for availability of materials, technological infeasibility, and so forth.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you. Yep. All right, I think we are ready to move on.
I think so.
Christina,
and
next
just
slide,
to let
please.
you know, the timing right now, we're at 2:20.
All
So
right.
we're about halfway.
Yeah, sounds good. We should be the next discussion topic isn't as long as the first one, so hopefully we might not have to go the full time, but we'll see how the discussion plays out.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
On to our next topic. That concludes our first discussion topic for today's meeting. Let's shift our focus to our second topic, covering the annual compliance certification report requirements. Like the last topic, we'll begin with an overview of the statutory requirements for compliance certification reports, leading to a discussion to further clarify how applicable provisions will be addressed in the regulations for this law. So the following slides will contain language from section 14 of the recycled content law to provide that overview of the requirements in the law. So with that, Christina, can you go to the next slide, please? So from the law, manufacturers are required to certify that their covered products are complying with the requirements of the law. Furthermore, manufacturers are to certify whether their covered products are exempt or approved for a waiver from their requirements. Manufacturers are also required to specify the exemption claimed for each of their covered products, along with proof of such exemption, such as citations to federal law, rule, or regulation, or certify that their products are intended for human or animal consumption. Manufacturers will only need to certify an exemption one time for the duration of an applicable exemption, unless there are changes to the product packaging or the product itself, or if the exemption no longer applies to that covered product. Next slide, please. The certification for the compliance certification report must be signed by an authorized representative from the manufacturer and include the amount in pounds of virgin plastic, glass, or paper, and the amount in pounds of post-consumer recycled content used in conjunction with covered products from the law. Next slide, please. So please be advised that the department may audit or investigate a manufacturer at any time to assess the manufacturer's compliance with the requirements of this act. For this reason, it is important to be forthcoming regarding manufacturer capabilities surrounding recycled content data collection to better inform the department on what manufacturers can provide. So with that, we can move to the next slide and begin the discussion on compliance certification reports. So this is just a break in the slides to break up the discussion topic from the overview. Next slide, please. Oh, no, perfect. Thank you, Christina. So with this slide, we are just looking to have the obligations for the regulated community align with what manufacturers already do to avoid the duplication of efforts. We would like to know, we would like the new program to work with the existing framework with the industry where possible. So with that, what should the department be aware of when collecting compliance data? I think we already got into a little bit of this, but we're also looking for what can be provided to substantiate recycled content utilization claims when providing the compliance certification reports. So again, we might have touched upon this a little bit more, but we're looking for more detail as to what can be provided to document that recycled content was actually utilized in the event that there is an investigation or audit caused began by the department.
Like, for example, with some other states requiring the use of the recycled, a certain percentage of recycled content, is there any particular record keeping or other type of tracking that the companies would have for how much recycled content is in their different products?
Exactly. While the compliance certification report, we are looking to make it as simple as possible. As mentioned, the department can audit or investigate at any point. So we need to know what we can request in the form of documentation as evidence for incorporating that recycled content, rather than just relying on that compliance certification report.
And like we'd like to work with what's already there.
Exactly.
That's another thing, because we want to make this more of a seamless introduction into the industry already. Diane, welcome back.
Yeah, so well, since California requires they have that certification document, that's what we use, signed by our rigid plastic product manufacturers. They sign it, and they tell us what products and how much of recycled content and source reductions on it. So
with that certification, do they have to provide any additional documentation, like to back up the cert, or is it just the certification itself?
Just itself. Yeah.
Okay.
Got it. When purchasing or procuring recycled content, aside from like maybe a contract or something that you have with a supplier, does the supplier maybe also provide receipts or invoices, or maybe have like purchase records of actually purchasing the recycled content? We're just trying to give some examples, maybe to jog some comments here, but we need to know what is available out there. I remember reading the California's AB 793 rules that they had published. I know they require like shipping manifests or material data sheets or purchase records. Is that something that is able to be provided? We haven't really discussed with California's staff how that came about. So we would like to hear from regulated community first before reaching out to other states that are also looking into this topic. And as always, if you want more time to think about this, you can always reach out to the recycled content email inbox. It'll be available at the end of our presentation today.
I don't see any hands yet, Chris.
Not seeing anything.
Oh, Scott DeFife. Hi, Scott. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm all right. Sorry, I couldn't be on for the first few minutes, but I had some colleagues on. The only thing I'll say here is it's very different for glass than for the world of plastics. And I think that a lot of the people who are producers or manufacturers under the New Jersey law are going to require utilizing reps and warranties from their suppliers for the amount of recycled material that is used. As we've said in comments before, recycled glass is just glass. It's the same. It's not materially different than the first-time glass. And so I think there's going to be, we can't necessarily do it completely the same for all materials.
Okay, that is good to know. If you have any like examples or preferences for how you would like the glass specific requirements in the compliance certification reports, feel free to email the recycled content email inbox as well. That way we can figure out how to address that in the rules as well, for specifically for glass, if that only pertains to glass.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, thank you.
All right, thank you much. Next, Doug Sheffield. Hi again, Doug.
Hello. So we do operate in California. The only thing that's required out there is the certification letter. There is a audit component for proof. We've never actually audited, but theoretically there's an audit requirement that would show proof of purchases either through POs and or invoices. But again, we've never been asked for them, but that's the requirement out there.
Got it. That's helpful. That's good to know. Do they have?
And I believe it's the same for the Washington law that went into effect January as well.
Right. That's good to know. Just in general, for any given manufacturer, what is the record keeping? What does that record keeping look like? Is it for a certain period of time? Do you keep it for like maybe 5 years and then discard or destroy or something like that? Or just what does that record keeping look like?
So I think for audit purposes, it's 5 years. I think our company policy, I think, is 10. But in reality, in invoicing electronic systems like we have, it's almost indefinite. So.
Okay, that's good to know as well. Thank you. Just want to get a better understanding as to what the internal systems might look like. That way we can make sure we're not asking for something that isn't available or readily available. So thank you. I think we covered all of the questions on this slide. I think we're good to move forward.
Yep.
Christina, next slide, please. Thank you. And again, I think we kind of touched upon this through the previous discussions, but really this is to get a better understanding of whether the in pounds requirement, because this is by statute, they were required to, manufacturers will be required to submit the data on an in pounds basis. So we want to know if that in pounds requirement will be problematic for any manufacturers. And if so, would a conversion factor, maybe in the rule or something like that, assist with converting to 2 pounds, for example? We don't have to spend too much time on this one again, but just want to give an opportunity for those manufacturers that might have a problem with the in pounds requirement.
And from today's discussions, we know that there's the in pounds issue, there's the in grams issue.
Right, exactly. And I wasn't anticipating to get into that much detail earlier on, but I'm happy to have covered it whenever we could. So
I don't think we didn't find out about a third unit of measurement, did we?
Right. No, maybe volume. I think volume was mentioned as well at some point, but
okay.
For the most part, it's going to be weight in pounds and maybe grams and having a conversion factor of some form, maybe in the compliance certification report or something like that. We'll have to consider how to exactly go about that, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be too problematic for most manufacturers as they already get the data in weight.
I'm not seeing any hands that seem to have an issue with it today, so.
All right, I think we're good to move forward then.
I think so.
So with that, I know we've kind of already touched upon this first question as well, but we want to know if it's possible for manufacturers to provide a breakdown of recycled content by brand rather than covered product category. I know we've heard from manufacturers already that they want it to be as simple as possible, and maybe this is a case-by-case scenario, but is it possible to break the calculations down by brand rather than just going along the surface level of covered product category? Maybe we shouldn't spend too much time on this, considering we've heard enough of the preferences from manufacturers so far today. So we want to make sure that we are covering questions that we haven't maybe touched upon. So yeah, let's skip this question. I think we've heard enough on this topic. So moving forward, we want to know what information shared with the department would be considered proprietary information. We want to make sure that when data and information comes in, that we are filing as appropriate. So if there is any proprietary information, we want to make sure that we either aren't going to ask for it, or if we do ask for it, we know that it is proprietary, so that we have to if we are ever ask for records, for example, that we omit that proprietary information. So we're really just trying to get prepared as to what we can expect might be proprietary information when reports come in.
Especially in light of the Open Public Records Act in New Jersey.
Yes, exactly.
And has this been an issue in any of the states that have similar legislation? Okay, we're not.
I think we got tired out from the first discussion topic.
No big feedback on this one. If there is, I'm wondering if we're not getting much feedback because it's all proprietary.
Could be. That's a good point.
Diane has her hand up. Hi again, Diane.
Hi. So I don't know really the answer to this, but my guess is that if you were going to post the amount of, percentage of post-consumer recycled content by brand on a website, if you go back to your Heinz ketchup, your Heinz line example and say, Heinz uses, 20% recycled content and this other brand is 10 or, I don't know if that'd be like public shaming to the brands that are lower or what. And so in that case, I think it would be kind of proprietary so that, the brands that haven't quite got there yet wouldn't want their information shared publicly.
Right.
That's the only thing I can think of. And we could, I'm thinking theoretically, do the breakdown by brand, but again, it would be more work. So your third question of how can we make it as simple as process or simple process as possible is just allowing us to give you the percent of PCR content by category.
Got it. That's good to know.
And
But
we've
also,
come full circle.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm thinking of this as like me having to do the reports and all the work it takes and everything. And going back to the exempt products, I mean, we have hundreds of thousands of products and many, many product lines. So, and we have many brands that are totally exempt. So they're industrial products or, OEM automotive products that would never go to a consumer. Would it be available for us to just exempt a whole brand of product instead of listing every individual product?
If that is the case and the entire brand would be exempt, all we would ask is that you provide the name of that brand so that we just so that the department knows that that brand is exempt.
Okay. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is from Terry Hall. Hi, Terry. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing well, thank you. I just have a couple statements about this whole slide in general. On the first one, it really needs to be by covered product category because brands can cover several different categories. So you could have one brand that's in multiple categories.
Which would go back to, I think, like the Tide and the Gain, where you have flings, liquids, sheets, what have you.
Powders, etc. Yes, exactly. Proprietary information, that's a little hard to answer until we kind of know what you're looking for and what you're going to ask. And the third one, least burdensome as possible. Refer to question one. It needs to stay as covered product category rather than brand, because trying to break out brands that are in multiple categories would be an ultimate nightmare. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
It definitely wasn't something I had considered before. Is there could be one product that falls under multiple covered product categories. So definitely don't want to make it as you don't have to double count, for example. So thank you. That's very helpful. All right, I don't see any more hands raised for this one.
Nope.
I think we're good to move on. So Christina, next slide, please. Perfect. Thank you. So really with this slide, the department is trying to better understand how supply chains were impacted by the pandemic and the resulting supply chain constraints. In order to assess the current landscape of procuring recycled materials, we would like to hear from you regarding the health of supply chain operations, both during and after the pandemic. That way we can get a better understanding of maybe like the availability of materials, how materials are moving through supply chains and so forth. This isn't pertaining to any of the discussion topics we got into. We just want to be prepared for when the standards take effect, what's going on maybe in the landscape now, so that we can predict what it might look like in the future. So with that, how have supply chain issues affected business operations and procurement of recycled content, both in the past and currently? And to follow up with that, if operations have not returned to the quote unquote normal, do you foresee a return to normal operations in the near future?
Doug Sheffield. Hi, Doug.
Hello. So I don't know if it's necessarily all pandemic related, but I can tell you in the blown film space, the PCR in general, the availability is extremely tight. It's not a material that's necessarily really easy or plentiful to get a hold of, and and I don't know that I see that getting any better anytime soon. Just because of the laws like this in California, Washington, and other states. There's a very, very tight supply.
Right. So is it less of a factor of the of like external factors like the pandemic, and it's more so a factor of the general supply of recycled materials?
Yeah, correct. I mean, there were some pandemic related effect on it. For the past year and a half, but in general is the bigger issue in my opinion.
Right. And I think one of the reasons that prompted this question was that when this bill was going through the legislature and during testimonies and stuff, a lot of it was going on during 2020 and 2021 when the pandemic was, right in the forefront of things. So we want to see how things have changed and progressed and evolved since then. So just trying to get a better handle and grasp on that, or in that realm. That's helpful. So thank you. That really it's helpful for us.
And next up, we have Scott DeFife. Hi, Scott.
Hello. I would say that the pandemic did have an effect on the availability of recycled glass supply. Things have been tight. The industries that use recycled glass use all of the available tons of recycled glass generally. But during the pandemic, and because a lot of the communities had to either halt, pause, or cease recycling operations, that did not help. I would tell you that it is vastly different in the areas of the country that have bottle bills or something like that have a large supply of materials. So there's going to be parts of the country that have been able to recover faster. Even the pandemic stopped all returns in most states that had bottle returns. That's picked back up, but the rest of the community recycling has not. So I would say 3 to 5 years from now, when some of the new EPR laws kick in, we'll have more. But at this moment, it's we're back to pre-pandemic in bottle bill states. We're not back to pre-pandemic in areas that do not have other supply side programs.
Got it.
Thanks for the perspective. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Next, we have John Catarano.
Yeah, I could just echo a little bit of what Scott was saying. We did see almost an 80% decline in the deposit states, and obviously in the Northeast that could impact a place like New Jersey. That has come back. Curbside picked up a little bit throughout that time, and I think that's just a fair data point to mention that there was a significant drop in collection. The RVM, reverse vending machine, kiosks in front of stores were shut down. So it's a mindful data point that you have here to talk about it.
Yes, we want to be aware of current events and things going on within the industry that might be out of manufacturers' control, or stuff that things that we cannot control as the department. So trying to want to keep ahead of any of those actions. So thank you.
All right, thanks, John. Next up, Diane.
Okay, I hate to hog the floor all the time, but here I go. And I'm not an expert by any means. I'm just seeing my point of view. But I live in a rural area, and they've recently removed all recycling drop-off bins. So we don't have curbside recycling unless you want to pay for it. So it's kind of a lot of money, but I'm considering it because I really want to recycle, and I really hate to go dropping it off in bins. I have to drive pretty far. But anyway, they really removed it, I heard, because people were not dropping off the right things. They were
Mhm.
putting, manufacturing, building materials and stuff, and they weren't doing it right. They weren't cleaning things. I don't know what else, but
Mhm.
they stopped. So all I know is recycling is kind of going down in some places. So
Mhm.
until there's a federal mandate or they optimize universal waste collection and separation, I think it's really going to be hard to get more PCR content.
Mhm. Right. Yeah, and it sounds like just from general comments we've heard so far is that while the demand is there needs to be also an intervention on the supply as well to make sure that the standards are achievable for all manufacturers. So, thank you.
All right, next we have Robert Locke. Hi again, Robert.
Hi again. I'm sure you already do subscribe to this, but I strongly suggest subscribing to Waste Dive's newsletter. That'll give you a good broad overview and update on PCR and where recycling programs stop and start. So I think overall the availability we're a food and beverage manufacturer, PCR is available. We have to obtain food grade PCR, and that means that the resin supplier needs to have an FDA letter of no objection, which sort of narrows even further our supply of PCR. But it is available, and there's two different approaches. One is that we make some of our own bottles. So in that case, we're buying our own resin, little pellets. And in other cases, we have bottle suppliers. We've seen some of our bottle suppliers acquiring companies that make PCR resin, and I've definitely seen an uptick in that in the last couple years because they see the pipeline in terms of demand. So they want to be able to provide their customers with integrated PCR for the bottles that are showing up at our facilities. I think it is a little bit more challenging on the pure resin suppliers because in those situations they're looking at we'll be either looking at mixing virgin and PCR resin at our facilities. And in some cases, those resin suppliers are considering creating individualized pellets where the PCR is integrated to each pellet at a certain level. So the PCR is there. It's certainly more expensive right now. And timeline makes a big difference as well. 6 months, 8 months, a year, being able to lock in volumes and while working on your existing inventory or being able to project across certain lines in certain states, that's all kind of affecting how we go about thinking to procure PCR, either for our resin or for asking our suppliers to integrate PCR into the bottles they make. So, like other things, whether just demand or pandemic related or supply chain related, the timelines for these things, especially since some of like our bottle suppliers, if they're going to provide us a bottle with PCR, they're upgrading equipment on their end of things to make bottles. And sometimes that equipment availability is, 6 months to a year to upgrade that equipment. So we're trying to be as proactive as possible along with the states, but timing does impact things as well as costs from a business decision standpoint.
So it sounds like there's a number of variables that need to be accounted for, but it's not that the solutions aren't there. There are solutions. They need to be brought up to scale, and you need the time to be able to do that.
Yeah, correct. We're seeing investments being made, particularly on our bottle suppliers. They see the writing on the wall with PCR and EPR laws. So that's just going to take some time for them to get that equipment in place and to make those acquisitions and to ensure the resin meets the FDA standards, things like that.
Well, that's good to know. So thank you for that. Thank you for your input.
All right, thanks, Robert. John Catarano, do you still have your hand up from before, or do you have an additional point? Just want to make sure I'm not missing you.
No, I'm sorry. I'll take that down. Thank you. My
All right, no-
apologies.
Good.
No
Thank you.
worries.
All right, I'm not seeing any more hands for this question or these questions, so I think we're
Nope.
good to move forward. Christina, can you advance the slides, please? All right. So we want to say thank you for participating in today's stakeholder meeting. At this time, we would like to open the floor for any lingering questions or comments that may not have been addressed during today's meeting, or if you would like to further add any discussion or comments on, now would be the time to do so. We just want to provide the opportunity for you to chime in with anything that might be lingering. But we do ask to keep the questions or comments relevant to today's discussion topics, being on calculating recycled content and the compliance certification reports. That way we can keep the questions and comments more relevant to today's discussion. I'll pause, maybe give everyone 30 seconds to come up with some additional questions or comments that you may have. And as always, you can always email the recycled content email inbox that will be at the end of today's presentation.
Clarence Fraschina. Welcome back, Clarence.
Yeah, so just confirming the link that Nell sent out, that would be the location for this recorded presentation.
Let me just check the link. Yes, that would be that is where this recording as well as the presentation will be made available probably within the next week or two.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing.
We have CZ. Hello, CZ.
Hello. Hi. Yes. I apologize if you may have covered this before, but I know there was at least a question I heard someone else ask about how do we perhaps prove the lack of availability of recycled content, not because of the pandemic, but just because the industry does not have it available. So, so in our industry, we need food safe, FDA certified food grade plastic. So it's very hard to find PCR in this context. In terms of if we need to request a waiver because of lack of availability, would, for example, a letter from our suppliers indicating that they are not able to get it, would that qualify us as enough documentation that there is lack of availability, or what might you consider to suffice here?
So I think a letter from like suppliers or where you're normally purchasing your recycled content would be one of the pieces. We haven't really had too many discussions as to what documentation will be required for waivers, but I think that will be at least one component. And then that will also be likely having additional stakeholder meetings beyond today's session to clarify what industry and manufacturers are capable of producing for documenting an exemption or a waiver or something like that down the road, as well as there's also Section 9 allows for the adjustment of standards for a period of time. That also has similar. There's similar criteria in that section as it is in the waiver section. So we have further considerations to make on that topic, but I do believe a letter of some form from suppliers would be sufficient, at least one component of it, at least.
Okay, and we have noted in the chat from Dave Westerhoff that comments on availability of PCR need to be qualified by resin type, PER, HDPE, and PP.
That is also very good thing to note as well. So thank you.
Next, Mary Ellen Papard, welcome back.
Hi, thank you again. I just one final comment on that point. I just wanted to add to keep in mind for, of course, COVID with the supply chain and labor issues and plant breakdowns and things like that caused a huge shortages, and I believe they are coming back. I don't think we're at normal yet, but something that we see in general with in different sustainability laws and bans or different changes is that there will be a really increased demand on certain, then other types of products, right? So let's say I'm just going to say you ban bags, you ban polystyrene, you ban a certain type of plastic or mandate a certain type of plastic. So the demand goes up significantly. So the steps that the other states are taking are having a huge impact the supply that's available for the various materials as well.
Right.
Good perspective. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Don't see any more hands for this slide. I'll give it another 10 seconds, maybe.
That sounds good. Just
Last
making
chance.
sure that we're covering as much as we can today in these two
Exactly.
topics.
We have some time at the end, so I want to make sure that we, take the time we need to make sure everyone has their voices heard. So.
And also, if you're more comfortable submitting written comments, please do send it to recycledcontent@dep.nj.gov.
All right. Oh, we have one more.
Allie Peck,
In the
welcome
nick of
back,
time.
Allie.
Hi, sorry, I just have a question on, do you have an anticipated time frame on another meeting, or next time we're going to be together?
We have not discussed meetings beyond today.
Okay.
We're trying to do it every other month, but don't quote me on that. If it's more so as the rulemaking team deems necessary. So likely won't be meeting again in February, but maybe again in March or April.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
I think we are good to move forward.
Agreed.
All right, so moving forward, to better inform the development of the compliance certification reports, the department welcomes example recycled content calculations from manufacturers. Doesn't have to be on specific products or actual data, just maybe maybe fabricated data, just to help us better understand how those calculations or what those calculations look like, so that they can be incorporated into the compliance certification reports. That would be very helpful for us. The example calculations will be examined for patterns to help the rulemaking team better understand what manufacturers can provide, which as I said, will be incorporated into the compliance certification reports. And finally, for any questions or comments that were not covered today, please reach out to the email on screen for further assistance. That's recycledcontent@dep.nj.gov, and someone will get back to you as soon as we can with a response. So now with that, I'm going to toss it back to Judy to close us out. I just want to thank everyone for your attention and participation today, and I look forward to seeing everyone at our next meeting. And as I said, that will be scheduled and sent out from the recycled content email inbox to all of our attendees today. So thanks again.
All right, Christina, next slide. Just some additional information to have in the back of your pocket. We'd like to thank you again on behalf of the Department of Environmental Protection for your time, your attention, and your really good input today. We want to let you know that summaries of the topics that were covered at today's meeting and relevant information are going to be made available following the meeting at https://www.nj.gov/dep/DSHW for Division of Sustainable Waste Management /recycled-content/index.html. Following the New Jersey Register publication of the rule proposal, which would be in some time after we get done with the stakeholdering, when it's eventually published in the New Jersey Register for public consumption, we will be accepting formal comments on the rules, and that can be made by anyone in the viewing area for a period of 60 days. And during that period, we take both oral comments at a public hearing as well as written comments. And lastly, we would ask you to, again, direct your main questions via email to recycledcontent@dep.nj.gov, which is listed here. Again, thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. We'll be seeing you again. You keep an eye open in your email inbox for your invitation for our next stakeholder meeting in the Recycled Content series. Thank you.
That concludes today's meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.